Well, brothers and sisters and guests, in order for the church to be healthy and to experience unity, it's important that we're able to distinguish between relative levels of importance when it comes to our beliefs. There's a theologian, who once said, every divine truth is important, though it may be that all divine truths are not of equal importance. Just imagine if everything was equally important. Everything was essential. Well, what would we have in the church? We would have arguing all the time. We'd have church splits all the time. There'd be no unity. But now just picture the opposite extreme. Imagine that everything was peripheral, that everything was optional. We'd have peace, yes, but that peace wouldn't be built on unity. Not true unity, at any rate. And false ideas that aren't real would be allowed to flourish, and also ideas that go against God's glory and against our good, they'd be allowed to flourish because everything would be okay. It would be optional. When you see this pictured for you here, hopefully you understand that some beliefs must be more important than others. So you'll hear today, we'll say this in the church, perhaps you've said it, I know I have from time to time, that that's not a salvation issue. What are we to think of a phrase like that in terms of helping distinguish between the relative importance of our beliefs? Is that a good phrase? Well, sometimes to distinguish between salvation issues and non-salvation issues can be helpful. But the problem is, how do you communicate that something that is a non-salvation issue is still important? So that's where this kind of language is lacking a little bit. So a better way then would be to distinguish between 4 levels of importance. And we're getting to the Trinity, don't worry. Between 4 levels of importance of our beliefs. We can talk about absolutes, convictions, opinions, and questions. First, the highest level is that of the absolute. An example of this would be saying Jesus is true God and true man. You see, if you deny that, if you don't believe that, you're not a Christian. That's a fundamental part of the faith. You need to affirm that. So those are absolutes, the highest level. What's the second level? Well, convictions. A good example of this would be baptizing the children of believers. If you don't agree on that issue, you can't really function, at least not fully, as members of the same local church. But see, notice the difference there. We're not saying that you can't be a Christian. People with differences on this issue can still recognize each other as brothers and sisters. I studied in a seminary with a number of Baptist students. If you read any books at all in Christian living and theology and so on, there's a good chance you've read books written by Baptist ministers. And so we bless one another. We commune with one another as believers. We would say this is not a salvation issue. And yet it's too important to just call an opinion. Its impact, the outworking of our different beliefs would be significant enough that we can't really be completely united at the local level. So absolutes, convictions. What's the third level? Opinions. What would be an example of an opinion? Well, there's many things we could point to. How you dress for church, for instance, would be one. The type of music we have in worship. You know, music is something that has caused so much division, unfortunately. It's so emotional, it's so subjective in many ways. And so people have strong opinions about music, but the reality is most of these opinions are not worth dividing over. Because the Scripture is less clear in many ways when it comes to how precisely we can worship. And so there's room for disagreement even within the local church. Absolutes, convictions, opinions. And finally, the lowest level would be questions. These are things we just don't know that much about. For instance, we could ask, when in his mind did God decree election? Was that before or after the fall? Well, you see, that's an unsettled issue that we just don't know very much about, and we may never know.